Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of Ashokan Hello. I'm your host today, Ally Britton. Real quick, I want to give a special shout out to a few people who I know are tuned in with us currently and who are active in the chat. We have Bree, Ella, Ann, and I want to give a special shout out to my friend, Chef Bill. Today, we have something really exciting in store for you all. Have you ever looked at a tree and thought, gee, I wonder what kind of tree that is? Well, if you have, then today you are in luck. One of our very talented educators, Haley Lutke, is going to bring you around the Ashokan Forest and help you identify trees, as well as explore some other mysterious action that's happening in our forest ecosystem. Below, we have some really great resources for you to check out after our lesson. We have an adventure fill-in-the-blank story. We have a little bit of information on the emerald ash borer, which you'll learn about shortly. And we have other forest activities that are suited for the whole family. Stay tuned after the lesson for a really special song. But for now, put your boots on, grab a pen and paper, and let's go meet Haley in the woods.
Welcome everyone! We are going to explore the Ashokan Forest today. In doing so, I hope we all come away with a new knowledge for our forest ecosystems and also an appreciation. But first, we should probably talk about what is forest ecology. In our video with Ally, she talked about aquatic ecology, and she went through pulling apart the word ecology, meaning the study of homes, which is the branch of biology that deals with organisms and their environment. Forests change this a little bit because forests are tree-dominated communities that also have animals and plants and other organisms. So we're going to discover what forest ecology means and what a healthy habitat of that is going to look like. So we found ourselves right here at our Ashokan numbered trees. Now, if you've been here with us before, you know that the numbered trees is a gathering place for students so that they know where they're going and to meet the instructors for the day. But the other cool thing about the numbered trees is that they are a stand of white pine, so a community of the same type of tree that are all growing in the same area. So earlier I asked if you thought that all trees of the same type in a forest ecosystem, would that be healthy or not? Well, it's actually complicated because in this instance, having the white pine bunched up like this is probably okay because the biodiversity of trees around this white pine stand is rich. But the one thing that could be difficult about having all the same tree means that they are more susceptible to things like disease. So, on a different note, let's talk about identifying a white pine tree because we said we wanted to meet the trees, and here is a beautiful one that I'm standing underneath. These trees can get up to 500 years old and can be identified most easily by these right here. So I'm going to get a little closer so that I can show you the needles. So I talked about how white pine trees have giant needles, and they do. So white pine trees typically have 5 needles per fascicle. And of course, the one I pull apart only has 4, but typically it has 5 needles per fascicle, and you can remember this by spelling out the word white, which also has 5 letters. These trees reproduce via cones, and you can see a really good example of one here. It has the resin on these little tips here, which also make it really great to start fires. So hopefully we'll see more white pine on our hike, but that's what we have here, a nice white pine. Bark kind of looks like paper, doesn't it? Well, if you thought that, you'd be right. Because this is Betula papyrifera, more commonly known as the paper birch. This tree loves to grow along rivers as it needs that moist soil to survive. The bark peels off in pieces like this, but you don't want to peel the bark off yourself because it might girdle the tree and really hurt it. Okay, so right next to me, we have another tree friend here at Ashokan, Fagus grandifolia. Grandifolia meaning large leaf. And if it was further along in spring, we'd be able to see its gorgeous big green leaves. But currently what we have are the beautiful buds of this tree. So this is what the bud looks like, and soon it'll turn into those big leaves that I was talking about. So this is one way that you can identify this tree. Other than the buds, you can identify this tree based on its distinct bark. The bark is very smooth, and because of that, people have felt compelled to carve into it messages and things. But we want to leave no trace, so I don't recommend doing that because it harms the tree. Now, something interesting about the American beech tree is that it's a very shade-tolerant tree, one of the most shade-tolerant deciduous trees we have here at Ashokan. It also reproduces very rapidly and can cause something called a beech thicket, where one beech tree can sprout from its roots, and it causes this beech thicket that kind of overwhelms the ecosystem around it if other trees aren't there to outcompete. So this is our cool American beech tree, Fagus grandifolia. Behind me, we have another great tree. Ignore the leaves, those are a maple tree, but we're going to be talking about the tree behind me, and that is the American ash tree, Fraxinus americana. This tree is really cool and really important for our forests. They make up 20% of New York State's forests. They are easily identifiable by their opposite branch arrangement, which means that their twigs come from the same point like this, whereas most other trees, the twigs come from alternate points. You can also identify this tree based on its very distinct diamond-shaped bark. Right here we've got a good view of that going up the tree. But these trees are also useful commercially and are 90% of the Major League Baseball bats. So if you have a wooden baseball bat in the MLB, it's probably made out of American ash. Hi! Look what I found while I was hiking. Right here, we have an interesting phenomenon that I haven't seen before. So come a little closer, and we're going to take a good look at it. Right here, we have the markings on the tree. What do you think could have caused something like this? Ants? Maybe termites? I don't know, but I do know that this is an interesting phenomena, and we should probably take some data to make sure that we have this as a reference point for later in our hike in case we see it again. What you'll need for this exercise is a pencil and a piece of paper. So we found a really good spot on this tree where we have a really good example of the design that we're seeing. Now I've got my piece of paper and I've got my pencil. And what we're going to be doing today is making a rubbing. So I'm going to put my piece of paper over the design, and then I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to put it on its side. When you do that, you're just going to rub back and forth against the tree, and it's going to imprint the design onto the piece of paper. Now this only works because we're working on a textured surface, and the more you rub with your pencil, the more defined your design is going to be. So I'm satisfied with this design, and you can see that it looks very similar to, in fact, it looks exactly like the design we have on the tree. But now that we have this, we can use it like a field guide and like a reference point to see if this is an isolated incident or a reoccurring event. Because if I find this design elsewhere, it might tell me that something is happening in this forest. So let's go investigate. So right behind me, we have my favorite tree here at the Ashokan Center. You just saw this majestic tree, and it's called the American Sycamore, or Platanus occidentalis. The awesome thing about this tree is that it loves to live near water, and it thrives in floodplain areas. This tree grows massive in size and can be easily identified by the top of the tree is very white, whereas the bottom of the tree has like brown potato chip kind of texture. Let's get a closer look at the tree to see what I'm talking about. So right here next to me, we've got a close-up shot of our American sycamore tree. And you can really see that peely bark that I was discussing earlier. Now when you look up into the tree's canopy, you can see that the tree gets whiter as you go up. It's really beautiful. Oh, hey guys. I'm just over here with our rubbing from earlier, and I think I found it again on this tree. Tell me what you think. When I lay down the rubbing next to this one, they look really similar. And I'm starting to think that this might not be an isolated incident. So as we walk away from our very sunny floodplain area where we just found our sycamore trees, we're actually going to be transitioning away into a shady coniferous forest where we're going to find all different kinds of trees that we haven't yet seen before. Now I'm interested to see how the light difference will affect the ecosystems, because we just came from a really sunny area, and now, as you can see, we're going to be coming into a densely packed, shaded coniferous forest. So why don't you come with me, and we'll discover what those differences mean. Cool we have right here is some moss, and as we hike further into this coniferous forest, the amount of moss that we're seeing is exponentially rising, and that's because the water coming down on this hillside and the rocks being exposed creates a perfect habitat for these water-loving organisms. So right here we've got Tsuga canadensis, otherwise known as the eastern hemlock. You can identify this tree based on its unique needles. If you look at the needles, they're dark on top, but when you flip the needles over, you'll see two white lines, and these are stemmatic lines that make them really distinctive and almost look like a surfboard. So that's one way that you can for sure tell if you've got an eastern hemlock on your hands. But why do we care about the eastern hemlock? The eastern hemlock plays a really important role in the biodiversity of a forest, especially here at Ashokan. Earlier we saw our Esopus Creek, and in that Esopus Creek live trout. And if you're like me and you like fishing, trout are a really important part of your spring season, but also for the organisms that like to eat those fish. So the eastern hemlock provides the crucial shade that keeps the water nice and cool, and also provides detritus for the river so that there is a good nutrient load in the river. But due to invasive species and Hemlock woolly adelgid, as Hemlock woolly adelgid, we could see this tree disappearing and therefore affecting the water ecosystem here at Ashokan. Now, if you don't know what an invasive species is, it is a non-native species that comes into an environment and has a negative effect on that environment and causes lots of damage. So we're hoping to not see that as a problem here at Ashokan, but it is something that we need to think about. So again, we've got Tsuga canadensis, the eastern hemlock. So here we are at a really interesting point in our hike. What we're seeing over here is a lot of that design and that phenomena that we were investigating the hike up here. So as a scientist, I would want to take some more data and some more measurements so that I could more accurately tell the health of this forest. So two of the tools that I'm going to be using today are right here. Right here we have a BAF reader, which is going to help us determine the density of the forest. And right here I have my DBH tape, or my diameter at breast height tape. So why don't you follow me and we're going to see how to use these tools so that maybe you could assess your own forest back at your house. All right, so because I'm by myself, I found a tree that I can wrap my arms around. So now I'm going to demonstrate how to use our DVH tape. So right here, we're just going to place the tape on the tree. We're going to wrap it around until we get our measurement. So as you can see right there, we are reading 4. That means that the diameter of this tree is 4 inches. Now, you might be wondering, why are we taking the diameter of the tree? So typically a forester would take the diameter of a tree because over time, if they keep going back to the same tree, those measurements will help determine how much that tree is growing or not growing. It could also help them determine the age of the tree, as trees will grow at different rates. So they might be able to discern how old this tree is based off of the measurement that they've took. So the next tool that we are going to use is our BAF reader, and it is going to help us determine the density of the forest. So a forest can either be too dense or not dense enough, so not enough trees in an area or too many trees in an area. If there are too many trees, there aren't enough nutrients for them all to share, and it's not going to support a healthy ecosystem. So we're going to be using this to determine the density, and I've tied this string onto my BAF reader because you need to hold it with your arm out straight, and you need to hold it 25 inches away from your eye. So when you're properly using the BAF reader, it's going to look like this. You're going to be looking through this box here, and you're going to make one full rotation like this. But I realize that you, the viewer, can't really see what I'm doing, or it's not as accurate of a view. So I'm actually going to get into a better position so that you can see what I'm seeing when I'm using my BAF reader. All right, so we're seeing right here, this little box. What we're going to do is we're going to spin. And every time this box is filled with a tree, we're going to count that as a number. So we're going to count it 1. So as you can see right now, I have 2 trees in my box, but they are not filling my box, which means that these do not count. So we're slowly going to rotate, and we're just going to see if any trees, not quite, because we're seeing, yeah, it doesn't quite fill. So we're going to keep turning. And we see we have 1 tree. So we're going to count 1. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep turning, keep turning. And we've got 2. And this tree sprouts, so it still just counts as 1 tree. So we've got 1, 2, and then 3. Let's keep turning. We've got 4. Let's keep turning ourselves. 5. This tree right here, 5. And then we've got this tree right here, which is number 6. Not quite. See how it doesn't fit? All right, so it looks like we had 6 trees in our BAF reader. So we're not done yet, and we have to do a little bit of math. So as you can see, the numbers have a 10 or a 20. Because we did it facing up like this, we're going to multiply our number by 10. So let's think, what is 6 times 10? I'm just kidding. We all know that that's 60. So 60 would be our number for our BAF reader. So I want you to guess right now what you think a healthy BAF number would be for a forest, or a healthy density. I'll give you a moment to think about that. All right, so our number is 60, and you might be shocked to find out that a healthy forest BAF number is around 200. So we can conclude from using our BAF reader that this forest is not dense enough, and that it's actually quite open. Interesting. So what I've discovered on my short walk through this grove of trees is that most of them have this design here, that one that we found earlier while we were on the trail. So these two trees also have this design. And at this point in the video, you're probably wondering, tell us, what is going on with this? So I actually know what is happening with this. And while it is going to be difficult to identify this tree right now because it is mostly dead and the bark is falling off, I can identify it based on its infestation. Because this is the work of an invasive species called the emerald ash borer, and it only affects ash trees. So we can safely assume that this is an American ash tree. Now, if you don't remember from earlier, I did describe what an invasive species is. So why don't you go ahead and tell me? Exactly. It's a non-native species that comes from somewhere else and comes into an ecosystem and has a really negative effect on that ecosystem. And we're seeing that effect behind us. So you might be wondering, how does this insect cause this much damage or cause these glorious trees to die? Well, we're gonna find out right now. So right here, I have an infograph that shows the signs of an emerald ash borer infestation. And it all starts with this insect right here, the emerald ash borer. Now this isn't to size. These insects are about this big in real life, but they're a robust jade green beetle that is quite beautiful. They plant their eggs, and those eggs turn into larvae, which look like this. Again, they're not to size. They're a lot smaller than that. But these larvae, just like me around 12 o'clock, like to eat a lot. And here we're seeing the journey that those little larvae take as they eat their way through the tree. Now these larvae will emerge as adults, and that's where we're seeing those D-shaped exit holes from the adults chewing in and the larvae coming out. Now you may be wondering, how can we find out if our tree has the emerald ash borer infestation before the tree dies? Because there are ways in which you can discover that. So right here we have an example of blonding, and blonding is caused by woodpeckers. They can tell before we can that juicy, delicious larvae are underneath that bark, and they want to eat that. So they'll peck away at the bark and take it off, and it makes it look like a blonde color. The trees that we have right in front of us have been dead for quite some time, so they look more gray, but it is really stark when you find a grove of ash trees with blonding. Another way that you can tell is that American ash trees have this beautiful, thick, oval canopy, and when the tree is under stress from an invasive species, like the emerald ash borer, you'll be able to see that the canopy isn't as thick. Now, this isn't a picture of a tree from early spring. This is when it should be at its peak, when it should have the most amount of leaves. And that's really what causes the death of the ash tree. The galleries here, we see them all over this tree here, if you want to look. These galleries actually girdle the tree and cut the straws that bring the nutrients from the roots up to those leaves. So what happens is that there's not enough nutrients for the leaves to survive, and therefore the plant can't photosynthesize, the tree can't photosynthesize, and it can't make sugars to sustain itself. Now, I don't know if we have any here. We kind of have some old examples of them, but one way that they'll try to combat this girdling is by growing the leaves right out of the base of the tree. And it looks kind of like this. They're called epicormic shoots. So if you have an ash tree, a healthy looking ash tree, but it is sprouting from the bottom, that could indicate that that tree is stressed out. So let's transition into what we think this might mean for the state of the forest here at Ashokan. Because ash trees make up 20% of New York State's forests, and we're already seeing that the infestation has gotten so bad that most all of the ash trees here at the center are dead. So what I have here with me is another graphic, and this is actually a fun visual. So this is going to help us see an interesting thing about how did the emerald ash borer get here to Ashokan. So with my map here, we see different shades of green. The greener the map is, so around Rochester and Syracuse, the more dense the amount of ash trees there are. So more ash trees in that area. And then the whiter it gets, that means there's less ash trees. So this is just showing the distribution of ash trees in New York State. So I'm gonna flip over my little graphic and we're gonna see these red dots. So take a moment to think, what do those red dots mean? What could they mean? So some good ideas. Okay. So what these dots are the zones of infestation. So these are where the emerald ash borer is most affecting throughout the state. And you can see that right here at the Ashokan Center, this big red dot is the biggest infestation zone. So we've got it the worst right here. But I think it's kind of interesting. How come if we have it here and we have it here, it's not in between? It's just a little beetle. They can't fly that far. So let's ponder that. I'm gonna flip over this again and we're gonna see this. So now we've got purple dots, and a lot of these purple dots are around these red infestation areas, but you know, I'm not quite sure what they are yet. What do you think these purple dots represent? All right, well, before I give that answer away, I'm gonna flip the next page and we're gonna see what that is. So right here, now this one's kind of a giveaway. We've got these black lines, and look how these black lines intersect almost every single infestation zone. So what do you think those are? All right, so the purple dots we're seeing are actually campgrounds. So they're campgrounds around New York State where people can go and have a good time outside. And these black lines represent our roads. So right here we've got the thruway all the way up this way. And what conclusions can you draw from that? If the infestation zones are being intersected by roadways and are close to campsites, how might this be traveling? What do you think? Yeah, so it's actually been discovered that we are the ones transferring this invasive species, and we don't even realize we're doing it. So right here, we're seeing that someone maybe went camping and took infected firewood. So if we were to cut this tree down and it still had larvae inside or adult insects that were overwintering, and we took those to a campsite, they could crawl out at that campsite and then begin to infest the ash trees in that area. So our impact on invasive species is big, and it's not always something that we mean to do. So right next to me, we have an ash tree that has been affected by the emerald ash borer. And we were discussing some things that might happen to the Ashokan forest with this invasive killing the ash trees. So right here, we're actually already starting to see forest succession happen. So right here, we're seeing artist conch. It's a type of fungus that is already starting to decompose this tree and turn it back into soil so that it can produce more life and new trees can grow here from the nutrients of this dead tree. So we have a little insight into what is happening, at least right now, with the effects of the emerald ash borer here. So throughout this video, I hope what you take away is an appreciation for forest ecology, and also gets you thinking about what you can do in your area to help mitigate the spread of invasives. The first thing you can do is get educated. Look up your local environmental agency and see what they have about what is going on in your area. The second thing you can do is get involved. Involve yourself in something like a BioBlitz, where you can learn how biodiverse your forest is. Or you can use apps like IMAP Invasives, which help track invasives through an area. I'm glad that you all took the time to come with me today and learn a little bit about forest ecology here at Ashokan, but this is all the time we have for you right now. So I'm going to bid you adieu and say goodbye. Back to you, Allie.
Wow, thank you so much, Haley. That was really incredible. Trees really do provide our planet with so much. You don't even realize it. They provide food and shelter for living things, and they protect our streams and our freshwater ponds by providing shade as well as nutrients. And they even turn carbon dioxide into oxygen so we can breathe. How cool is that? Now again, make sure to check out the resources that are below so you can further your knowledge and also test yourself about what you learned today. Thank you all so much for joining us here once again. We really appreciate the support. And make sure to tune in next week. Next week, that's right. Same time, same place. Our lesson is going to be on Ashokan wildlife. And now we have a special song from Mike and Ruthie of the Mammals and their kids, Willie and Opal. This was filmed at their home right up the street, and it was recorded just for you. It's called Green Leaves in the Trees. See y'all next time, and here is our song.
Yes. Okay, here we are out on our porch in West Hurley, New York. This is where I wrote this song for Opal when she was just a little infant. It's called Green Leaves in the Trees. Ready, guys?
Yeah.
Green leaves in the trees.
Green leaves in the trees.
Stones in the walls.
Stones in the wall.
Sweet flowers on the breeze.
Sweet flowers on the breeze.
You'll learn it all.
You learn it all.
Sweet, sweet summer fruit.
Sweet, sweet summer fruit.
Yummy apples in the fall.
Yummy apples in the fall.
Swimming in your birthday suit.
Swimming in your birthday suit.
You'll learn it all.
You learn it all.
Bluebird in the sky.
Bluebird in the sky.
Pretty horsey in the stall.
Pretty horsey in the stall.
And your mama's lullaby.
And your mama's lullaby.
You'll learn it all.
You learn it all.
All right, everybody, one more verse. Try it at home. Green leaves in the trees.
Green leaves in the trees.
Stones in the walls.
Stones in the wall.
Sweet flowers on the breeze.
Sweet flowers on the breeze.
You'll learn it all.
You learn it all.
Very good. Thanks for singing with us, everyone. Green leaves in the trees.